The village of Kvitova was dying of thirst, turning into a kingdom of dust and cracked earth. The river that had once been its lifeblood now barely oozed out in a dirty stream, and its bare, rocky bottom resembled the skeleton of a prehistoric animal. The old people, dried out by the sun and despair, began to recall again the legends of the Deep Rock, the ancient spirit of the swamps, who wakes up once a century to drink the river and punish people. But for 16-year-old Orisya, these were only scary tales that tried to explain the real, sticky horror that settled in the heart of the forbidden marsh swamps. This horror had a name, and she was going to find out what it was. Her main driving force was her younger brother, Timko, who was tossing and turning in a fever on an old bed. His body was on fire after a few sips of that stagnant water that still remained in the wells. The witch doctor only shook her head helplessly, muttering about the curse, but Orisya saw the truth. It was poison, not magic. Clutching the handle of her father's old knife to her white knuckles, she slipped out of the house at dawn, when the village still breathed an anxious, restless sleep. With each step towards the swamps, the air became thicker, heavier, saturated with the smell of rot and dampness. Soon the familiar forest gave way to twisted, diseased trees, whose branches stretched towards the gray sky, like the hands of drowned men. The silence was broken by a disgusting, rhythmic clatter that came from the depths of the swamp. It was not the usual croaking that everyone was used to. The sound was deep, guttural, as if something gigantic and ancient was trying to spit out the silt that had clogged its lungs. And then she saw them. Clinging to the trunks like giant leeches, slimy, translucent cocoons hung, each the size of a full-grown sheep. They pulsed faintly, and through their thin shells one could see the hideous, distorted silhouettes of something alive stirring inside. Hiding behind a giant, moss-covered root, Orisya held her breath. One of the creatures slowly rose from the murky green water, and the girl almost screamed in horror. It was a frog, but a frog from her worst nightmare. The size of a large wolfhound, its warty skin oozed a pale green liquid that drained into the water, poisoning it. Its huge, eyelidless eyes glowed in the swamp mist with a cold, phosphorescent light. The monster opened its wide mouth, and the same deep, rumbling sound escaped from there. Along with the sound, a stream of caustic saliva spurted from its throat. It hit the trunk of a tree, and the bark hissed, covering itself with black, smoking spots. Making its way further, risking being noticed, Orisya saw the real cause of the drought. The river was blocked by a gigantic living dam. It was not just clay and branches. It was a moving, breathing mass of hundreds of these monster frogs, interlocking their webbed paws, forming a living, disgusting wall that held back the flow of water. And in the very center, on a makeshift throne made of mud, animal bones, and perhaps people, sat their queen. She was colossal, bloated like a mountain of rotting flesh. Her skin shimmered in sickly shades of green and purple. The huge bladder beneath her jaw rhythmically inflated and deflated, emitting a low-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air. This hum hypnotized the smaller creatures, forcing them to hold their formation still. Orisya understood. To free the river, she had to hit this monster. The sudden crunch of a branch behind her made her heart stop. She turned and saw Timko's frightened eyes. Sick, barely standing on his feet, he followed her. "Orisya," he whispered, and that was enough. One of the guards turned his head sharply, and his flashlight eyes stared into their shelter. Rocket broke into a fit. The swamp erupted in fierce, hungry croaks. "Run!" Orisya shouted, pushing her brother back. The first monster jumped, spitting acid. The girl jumped back, and the hissing liquid burned the moss where she had just stood. She ran, and a pack of slippery predators rushed after her. A memory of her father's stories flashed in her head. Firegrass, which grows in dry areas of swamps and ignites from a spark. Having made a hook, she led the chase to a familiar clearing, grabbed a bunch of dry plant, and struck a spark with 2 flints. The grass instantly flared up with a bright torch. The frogs, accustomed to the darkness, flinched in fright. This was her chance. With a flaming torch in one hand and a knife in the other, she ran back, right at the queen. The guards hissed, but were afraid to approach. Without stopping, Orisya threw the torch with all her might into the queen's huge, throbbing throat pouch. The dry leaves clung to the slippery skin, and for a moment it seemed as if nothing had happened. Then the skin began to blister, and with a piercing shriek like metal grinding on glass, the pouch burst into flames. The queen roared in pain, and the roar shook the entire swamp. Her body shuddered wildly, and her giant jaws opened reflexively. A powerful stream of water gushed from her mouth, the entire river she had been holding back. The living dam broke. The water roared forward, washing everything away.